Building the wall. New developments in the Trump administration's attempt to secure the border between the United States and Mexico. Why critics think the White House is abusing its power. Deadly outbreak. The coronavirus in China continues to spread, and it claims a high-profile victim. Working for peace. An update on the efforts to form a government and end the civil war in South Sudan. And an open heart. Pope Francis has a warning for those who lack compassion. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, February 18th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. The Trump administration says that it will waive federal contracting laws to speed construction of a wall at the U.S. Mexico border. The Department of Homeland Security says the wall is getting built faster than ever before. But critics of President Donald Trump's major campaign promise are speaking out. Correspondent Mark Irons reports now from the White House. Mark?
Tracy, some of the president's harshest critics call the border wall a monument to hate. Now, in the latest effort to continue its construction, the Department of Homeland Security is waiving some regulations that they say will allow 177 miles of the wall to be built more quickly in Arizona, California, New Mexico, and Texas.
And we are building the wall. We're going to have over 400 miles of wall built by the end of next year. It's moving rapidly.
President Trump has long called for a border wall on the U.S. southern border, and today he's getting a step closer to his goal. The Trump administration has announced it will waive procurement regulations, allowing 94 miles of wall to be built this year, bringing the president closer to his pledge of about 450 miles since taking office. The move is expected to spark criticism. The Trump administration is overstepping its authority, but legal challenges have failed. And some critics are concerned about how further wall building will affect Native American sites. Senator Elizabeth Warren tweets, "Desecrating native sacred sites to build Trump's hateful border wall is unacceptable. We must respect tribal sovereignty. No project impacting native sacred sites should proceed without the free, prior, and informed consent of the tribal nations concerned." Last week, Warren also spoke out against another Trump administration plan to divert Department of Defense spending to border wall construction. She says the president is bypassing Congress to fulfill his campaign promise.
This is wrong. It violates separation of powers. And one more time, it makes Donald Trump act as if he believes he is above the law.
The Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, defends the president's move to use Pentagon funds.
Let's say this much: border security is national security, and national security is our mission. I think many NATO allies understand that as well. The action we took is legal under the law.
Over the weekend, the president defended the strength of his border wall after previously a section had fallen over. The president said it was quickly fixed, quote, forever. Tracy?
Thank you, Mark. Correspondent Mark Irons reporting for us tonight. Thanks again. While President Trump commutes the 14-year prison sentence of former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich.
We have commuted the sentence of Rod Blagojevich. He served 8 years in jail. It's a long time, and I watched his wife on television. I don't know him very well. I met him a couple of times. He was on for a short while of The Apprentice years ago. Seemed like a very nice person. Don't know him, but he served 8 years in jail. There's a long time to go. Many people disagree with the sentence. He's a Democrat. He's not a Republican.
Blagojevich, convicted of political corruption. He was found guilty of crimes that included seeking to sell an appointment to Barack Obama's old Senate seat. Blagojevich is expected to be released from prison today. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden is hoping Saturday's Nevada caucuses will revive his campaign. His supporters believe the former vice president's message will resonate with the state's more diverse population.
No matter what happened in Iowa or New Hampshire, I will remain confident in this. I will see.
In Nevada, hope for a revival for Joe Biden's campaign.
A turnaround is coming.
Nevada marks the first test of Biden's theory that he'll perform better in states with more diverse demographics. Minority voters made up more than a third of Democrat caucus goers here in 2016. As early voting kicked off this weekend, Joe Biden targeted Latino and African American voters, saying it's time their voices are heard.
The reason why we are here is because, 99% of the African American vote hasn't spoken yet, and 99% of the Latino vote hasn't spoken yet.
But the former vice president faces stiff competition for the Latino vote from Bernie Sanders, who won the majority of Democratic Latino caucus goers here in 2016. Yvonne Cancela is a 33-year-old state senator backing Biden and thinks his experience will resonate with Latinos here.
It's really important to voters that they see in a leader experience in making sure that they can deliver on the campaign promises that they're making. Biden has that, and I think that's going to be a differentiating point that will win over a number of voters, Latino and otherwise.
The former vice president is also making a hard push for union support.
I know, in their hearts, the culinary workers are there.
The Powerhouse Culinary Union declined to endorse a candidate before the caucuses, but they did express disapproval of Sanders' Medicare for All plan. The former vice president is trying to seize on that health care divide.
We're not going to tell all of you who've broken your neck and given up wages and given up salaries in order to be able to have health care through your employer, and you've worked like the devil for it. You're not going to be required to give it up.
Are you planning on caucusing for or voting for Biden? Oh, fantastic. That's awesome news.
Biden has expressed confidence he'll place in the top 2 in Nevada.
How well do you need to do here in Nevada?
I just have to do well.
Do you think you need to win? You need to come in first place?
No, I don't think I have to, but I think we have a shot at doing that.
As his campaign hopes the state will be a launching pad in his path to the nomination.
He's in Nevada now, and it's going to be a different story. And I believe moving forward, the country will understand the momentum that he will pick up. Joe's our boy.
While Joe Biden is Catholic and has had an evolving view on abortion for decades, he supported the Hyde Amendment, which bans taxpayer dollars from being used for abortion. But last year, Biden reversed course and is now in sync with a 2016 Democratic platform, which calls for the end of Hyde. Billionaire Mike Bloomberg has qualified for tomorrow's presidential debate in Nevada. It is the first time that he will stand alongside rivals that he has so far avoided bypassing the early voting states. A new poll out today shows the former New York City mayor second with 19% support nationally in the Democratic nominating contest. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders leads. The Boy Scouts of America organization has filed for bankruptcy. The youth group faces a wave of sexual abuse lawsuits. Several thousand men say they were molested by scoutmasters or other leaders decades ago. The 110-year-old organization is hoping its operations can continue intact. It has also encouraged all victims to come forward. India has built a wall in Gujarat ahead of a visit by President Donald Trump. The wall is more than 1,600 feet long. Reports say the wall was originally planned to be 6 to 7 feet tall, but was reduced to 4 feet. Critics say that it is designed to block the view of a slum area inhabited by more than 2,000 people. President Trump is expected to visit the city of Ahmedabad in western India next week for a 2-day visit. The corruption trial of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to begin on March 17th. That's 2 weeks after Israel's national elections take place on March 2nd. Prime Minister Netanyahu is charged with fraud, bribery, and breach of trust for allegedly accepting lavish gifts from billionaire friends and exchanging regulatory favors for more positive media coverage. Vatican authorities have seized documents and computers from a Holy See official. The home and office of Monsignor Alberto Perlasca was raided as part of an investigation into an alleged financial mismanagement. Monsignor Perlasca formerly worked for the Vatican's Secretariat of State. South Sudan leaders finished their first round of peace negotiations after a recommitment last month to end hostilities in the country.
La garanzia del cessate il fuoco.
Secretary General of the Community of Sant'Egidio stated last Friday that the security of the civilian population will be guaranteed. 50 delegates attended the negotiation meeting. It comes 1 month after the South Sudan government and the opposition movement alliance signed a declaration on the peace process. The process is mediated by the Community of Sant'Egidio, a Catholic group focused on prayer, peace, and helping the poor. Mauro Garofalo, International Relations Officer for the Community of Sant'Egidio, joins us from Rome. So, Mauro, what did you talk about in the negotiation meeting?
This is actually the second round of talks with the South Sudanese representative. This time we accomplish an agreement for the non-signatories of the Addis Ababa process to enter in the monitoring process for the ceasefire. This is something real. This is something that will have and already have effects on the ground. So the government and the opposition will work together for silencing the guns in South Sudan.
How is the current government working on ending violence during this negotiation period?
The government sent a very high-level delegation to Rome to discuss with the non-signatories all the details, political and technical, about this agreement. It seemed to us that they were very serious about it. And this is a step forward in order to diminish at least the level of violence in the country. We know that we are in a crucial moment for the history of this very young country. We really hope that these talks of Rome will help in forming the government of national unity, but also to bring some reconciliation in the country.
On Saturday, the South Sudan president announced the country will return to a 10-state system. Did you discuss this new transitional government and how it will look?
We open a path of dialogue with the non-signatories. The number of states is a key issue for reconciliation in South Sudan, and it will for sure help all this archipelago of opposition to come back to the political dialogue. For now, we focus on the cessation of hostilities, but the path to discuss more issues, including that you already mentioned, is open, and we are going to continue with other meetings in Rome, both with signatories and non-signatories. So our aim is to support the international process and to work on the cessation of hostilities.
I know the South Sudan delegates will come back in March for their next negotiation meeting. What can we expect until then?
We expect for them to take even more concrete steps towards the end of violence. We expect to keep this space of dialogue open as much as we can, because with the cessation of hostilities and with an open and frank discussion, we could face even more difficult issues such as the federalism, number of states, and of course the security issue, which are also a key point in the situation. So with a confidential but frank discussion, we will address also these other issues.
Mauro, we don't have much time, but I was wondering, how important is it for the Holy See to be involved?
Let's say that since the spiritual retreat, all the political actors and especially the leadership of the country felt a great moral pressure. And even during our meetings, we had this feeling of guilty. They felt guilty for not accomplishing that much after that historical moment with Pope Francis. So if we may say that these talks, this engagement toward the end of violence is also a kind of answer. But for sure the role of the Holy See and the gesture of the Pope was of a great importance, a fundamental importance.
Mauro, thank you so much for your insight. We really appreciate it. Mauro Garofalo, International Relations Officer for the Community of Sant'Egidio. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Coming up, faith leaders come together to talk about the 2020 census. And an update on the deadly coronavirus in China and the Americans under quarantine. A hospital director who helped to lead the fight against the coronavirus has become one of its victims. Liu Zhiming had mobilized all the resources of his hospital in Wuhan City, the center of the outbreak. It comes as a group of Americans fresh off a cruise ship where they spent weeks under suspicion of coronavirus are back in the U.S. However, they are not in the clear just yet. An emotional return.
It was amazing. I have nothing but gratitude for the immense effort that was put into getting us all back home.
Sarah Arana is among the more than 300 Americans evacuated from the Diamond Princess cruise ship, which has been under quarantine due to more than 400 confirmed cases of the coronavirus.
It's been exhausting. It's been really emotional. It's been confusing.
Some of the passengers are receiving medical attention.
One patient was transported to the hospital, to the biocontainment unit, because of a chronic condition, and also was experiencing some mild symptoms. The remainder of the patients were transported to the quarantine unit.
More than 73,000 people are infected with the coronavirus globally.
If you look at the numbers overall, the cases still continue to increase, but the pace at which we're seeing new cases has come down a bit.
Mainland China is being affected the most. Officials there have placed travel restrictions on nearly 800 million people. And the country is also literally cleaning money in an attempt to stop the spread of germs. As for the U.S., health officials say the risk is minimal.
We need to keep an eye on it because it can change, and that's the reason why we're taking it very seriously.
Well, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention listed more than 460 people in 42 states as under investigation for the coronavirus. 15 of them tested positive, 392 were negative, and the remaining results are still pending. Joining us now via Skype to discuss the deadly outbreak is Claudia Rosett, Foreign Policy Fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. Claudia, welcome back.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Well, as we just heard, more than 73,000 people worldwide are infected. Is there any progress being made to stop the outbreak?
It's really hard to say because the huge concentration of this outbreak is still in China. And you can't trust what China says. You just can't. They've probably been wildly understating the numbers since the beginning. And we just don't know. In other places, there are some alarming things going on. You know, it's been slow to spread, and at the same time, we just had hundreds and hundreds of people disembark in Cambodia off a cruise ship where they thought that it was fine. The Prime Minister of Cambodia came down and shook hands with all of them, gave them a free bus tour of Phnom Penh, and then it turned out that one of them had been infected. She's now in a hospital in Malaysia. So we wait to see. This thing has an incubation period. We don't know whether that kind of thing means further spread outside China.
Well, the United Nations Secretary General said today the coronavirus is very dangerous, but it's not out of control. What are your thoughts?
I think he must feel pretty safe. I notice he's not saying that from Hong Kong or from some of the places where they're trying desperately to keep this thing contained. You know, there have been things done, and it does seem to be slow to spread outside. But we're still sort of within the window where we don't really know how this thing is amplifying. So the Secretary General very often plays politics. I wouldn't listen to him for a second as an expert on this disease.
Well, the virus is also causing problems for the global financial markets. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, the markets are seeing a real problem because China is the world's second largest economy. It's been effectively paralyzed since they finally, after trying to cover this thing up, since they finally admitted in late January they had a problem and then shut down, quarantined scores of millions of people, the entire province of Hubei. They have cities where people are not allowed to go out except once every 3 days. A family may send one member to buy groceries. So you have this huge economy, which is part of many of our supply chains. Everything from electrical equipment to clothes to all sorts of things that you just don't think about much is now not coming out of China. So we're running off inventory. People will start sourcing things elsewhere. But this is a huge, genuine loss as far as world production.
Claudia, we mentioned this the other day, that China's president had admitted that he knew about this really before it even became news. What do you think about that? What do you think that looks like in the public eye for him?
He's a dictator, and he runs the Communist Party of China, which, sort of takes its playbook from the Soviet Communist Party on propaganda. And what he is now doing is trying to appropriate the narrative, as they call it, of this whole thing. The fact is, he runs a system that tried to cover this up, that actually arrested and reprimanded a doctor who tried to warn his colleagues and told him not to monger rumors. That's the system that Xi Jinping runs. And for all the surveillance where he tries to mold people's behavior and the vast investments made under him in China's military, producing the parade October 1st, their national day, where for hours there were missiles and tanks and everything going through Tiananmen Square. It takes a lot of gall to roll tanks in a parade through Tiananmen Square after 1989. But he's trying to turn this around because his priority, and I base this on many years of watching how the Communist Party behaves in China, his priority is not actually the interest of China's people. It is the preservation of the power of China's Communist Party rule. So we're going to hear anything he wants to say, and I would not put faith in any of it.
Oh, Claudia, thanks so much for your insight. So good to see you again. Claudia Rosett, Foreign Policy Fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Up next, Pope Francis tells the faithful why it's so important to have compassion. Plus, during Black History Month, we look at the unique story behind the first African-American Catholic parish in the nation's capital.
Alla distruzione del fratello, perché non c'è compassione.
Pope Francis says God asks us to have an open heart full of compassion. At his daily Mass at the Vatican, the Holy Father says people who insist on being self-reliant often become selfish, and it leads to destruction. Instead, God will enter the hearts of those who remember how much God has done for us and how much He loves us. Faith leaders gathered this morning at the Washington National Cathedral for an Interfaith Summit with the U.S. Census Bureau. The purpose was to urge faith leaders to reach out to their congregation members to make sure that they will be counted in this year's census. The Census Bureau director spoke before a panel discussion.
Faith leaders play an integral role in the community as you know how to best reach your community and members, hard-to-reach families, individuals, children, national and local leaders, key stakeholders, and followers.
Bishop Joe Vasquez of the Diocese of Austin, Texas, joined the summit in a recorded message and talked about the benefits to his community from the data gathered in the census. The census takes place every 10 years. The process of counting individuals for this census starts next month. And finally, tonight, in honor of Black History Month, we have a story about a U.S. president who once held a fundraiser for an African-American Catholic parish. In 1864, President Abraham Lincoln held a picnic at the White House to raise money for the new parish in the nation's capital. An estimated 1,500 people attended. The money was used to build what became St. Augustine Church. The original building was torn down in the 1940s, but the church was later rebuilt and the parish remains a strong one. Today, it has more than 2,000 members. Joining us now to discuss the history of the church and a Catholic look at Black History Month is Gloria Purvis. She is the creator of Authentically Free at Last and host of Morning Glory on EWTN Radio. Gloria, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here with you.
Yeah. So tell us, I know that you were a parishioner at the church for a very long time, and so you know a lot about the history of it. Let's talk about that because Abraham Lincoln's contribution wasn't the only thing.
Yeah. So really, the impetus for the idea of having the fundraiser on the White House lawn came from the Free Black Catholic parishioners at the parish. The Ways and Means Committee chose Gabriel Coakley to go to the White House and ask President Lincoln why him, because his wife was a noted seamstress who sewed a lot of dresses for Mary Todd Lincoln, so he had an in, if you will, and he approached the president with this idea of having a fundraiser on the White House lawn, and it was a massive success. And I think what makes it all the more remarkable is people need to remember that at that time, Black Catholics were separated from white Catholics in the worship in church. Even if you were in the same parish, you had separate Sunday schools for the Black children, separate seating for Black Catholics, and Black Catholics often had to receive the Eucharist after all of the white Catholics. And so it's a story of resilience and love for the faith that these people didn't leave the church but decided we need to fund our own parish.
Yeah, and how amazing. Just to go up to the president, right?
I know. Those days you could do that. And the fact that he had an in because of his wife, having this relationship with Mary Todd Lincoln, the women always come in handy, huh?
Absolutely,
so
they do.
It's like a good thing,
Absolutely. Well, tell us, is there anything else that we should know about the history of the church?
Well, I think the church is still thriving. That's one. The other thing that I think people probably are not aware of, but the choir at St. Augustine Church was world-renowned. And in the early days of the church, they also did tours to raise money for the parish. It reminds me a bit of the Jubilee singers from Fisk University that would go around internationally and sing to raise money for the university. Likewise, the parish had a world-famous choir that raised money. And in fact, the parish recently sang at the White House when Pope Francis came to the United States.
Wow.
I know.
So it's Black History Month, of course,
Yes.
we know that. Let's talk a little bit about that and the history of Black History Month, why it started.
So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the son of slaves, was a graduate of the University of Chicago. He got his master's and bachelor's degree from the University of Chicago and got a PhD from Harvard University. First was W.E.B. Du Bois. He recognized that there was a dearth of study of Black life and of Black achievements, and so he started the study of Negro history, an organization to do that in 1915. And this was 50 years or so after the Emancipation Proclamation. He went to a big celebration and saw the desire of African Americans to know more about the history. He started this study. Then in 1926, he started Negro History Week. In 1976, President Gerald Ford made it Black History Month. Now, for Catholics, how we might look at this is, in the church, we have saints who we look to for inspiration. Dr. Carter G. Woodson likewise said there are so many Black people who've achieved things, they could serve as an impetus for Black people to have an inspiration to better themselves. So Black History Month serves to remind us of the great achievements of so many African Americans in hopes of inspiring us to do better and also to educate the public on what has largely been an ignored history.
Well, Gloria, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge. So much we could talk about.
I tell you. Thank you for having me.
We'll have you back. Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We are back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.